Hello, and thanks for joining us for All Things DSO today. I'm Beth Gaddis, the editor-in-chief at Planet DDS, and I'm joined by my friend Brian Colao, the director of the Dykema DSO Industry Group. Brian, it's great to see you.
So good to see you, Beth. Always just love getting together and talking to you about my favorite thing, DSOs.
It has been quite a while since we last talked. The last time we did an All Things DSO, it was the day after the inauguration in mid-January. So tell me what's going on. How are people feeling after the first quarter?
Yeah, what I had characterized as the great uncertainty, going into, well, most of the great uncertainty was 2024, and we had a lot of optimism with the presidential election. And the day after the inauguration, there was a lot of optimism that things might turn, kind of quickly, or there might be a quick turnaround. Unfortunately, some of the priorities of the administration, they've done a lot of things, but some of the priorities have gone kind of counter to a quick turnaround of the M&A markets. For example, these trade wars, some things that were on the horizon that everybody was hopeful for were, we're going to put an end to the Russia-Ukraine war. We're going to put an end to the unrest in the Middle East. Those two, I read an article today in like the New York Times or something where it said, the administration might pull out of negotiations and just say, they're going to throw in the towel. So, the wars and the unrest have not ended, unfortunately, as quickly as, maybe it was promised or they thought it was going to happen. And then on top of it, we now have these sort of unpredictable trade wars with the tariffs. And, that's leading to higher prices and higher issues. So all of that is just extended what I called the great uncertainty, and it certainly has not succeeded. The first quarter is now over with. The M&A market certainly did not jumpstart in the first quarter. Here we are, middle of April, into the second quarter. And I don't see anything, imminently going to happen with the M&A markets now, so I just feel like, the great uncertainty has sort of, continued and will probably for the foreseeable future, at least this quarter and going into the third.
Well, with all the private equity leaders that you talk to and the DSO leaders that you talk to, I mean, do they just feel like they're frozen, that, they're just in this holding pattern that's now been going on for almost 3 years?
Yeah, I mean, that was the sentiment in half of 22, 23, all of 24. I think that certainly was the sentiment in the first quarter of 25. I think a lot of the leaders are thinking, hey, we got to make some things happen. And, what exactly that looks like, they're still contemplating, but I think they're starting to get more comfortable that this environment may stay for a while and we got to get back to business as usual. So it wouldn't surprise me if, at some point in the next several months, we do see an uptick in activity just because, maybe they've priced it in. I mean, I think for so long, a lot of the buyers were thinking that these conditions of inflation were temporary and they don't want to price that into the transaction because it's going to go back down. If it goes on much longer, I think they're just going to have to price it in and just say, look, it's business as usual. We're going to buy stuff and sellers are going to sell stuff, but everybody's just going to have to price this into the transaction. And maybe that means that, the sellers don't, get quite as much or something, but, it's not going to last forever. At some point, and the leaders that I'm talking to in private equity, are starting to come around to that belief that if there's not some dramatic reduction in interest rates, then we're just going to have to price it into the market. We can't just not do deals forever. So that may just be the case that eventually people just price it in.
So two questions about that. One is that, when you're now factoring that in, can you give an example of how that might impact a deal?
Yeah, I mean, not a terrific one. I mean, the seller's not going to get the return that they hoped for. I mean, that's, and, that happens. I mean, that's the nature of markets, right? You win some, you lose some. You buy some stock and it quadruples in value and you make a killing. And then you buy another stock and, it loses a third of its value, or sometimes the company, goes bankrupt. Like, you never know. That's with publicly traded stocks. In the M&A markets, private equity investors invest in this and they're hoping that they'll get a 5x return, a 4x return. And, that was happening with great regularity for a while. But during downturns in the market, sometimes that doesn't happen. And, it may be with some of these things that the return on a particular investment just ends up being underwhelming and not what they hope. That's why, they don't just buy one thing. They typically will buy, dozens of things in their portfolio. Some perform well, some don't perform as well. But whenever that happens, there's an opportunity for the new buyer that generally buys at a reduced price to realize value on the back end. If somebody buys it right now, at a reduced price, that might be bad news for the seller. It's probably good news for the buyer. And in the next couple of years, when the market does improve, there'll be an opportunity for that buyer to get a really nice return. You don't like to see it. It's terrible. Nobody does. I personally don't like it when I buy a stock and the thing underperforms or goes way down. Nobody likes it. But unfortunately, that's the nature of markets. It just is. You win some and you lose some.
What kind of pressure is that adding now on the DSO leadership? I mean, are you seeing that after a couple of years now of just this kind of like grind and waiting for things to turn around and having that not really happen? Are you seeing that more private equity investors are saying, hey, like we need to change the leadership at the top of DSOs and maybe bring in some different people with different ideas from other verticals?
I think most of that, if it was going to happen, has already happened. I think, when the market abruptly took, as we've talked about many times on this show, a downturn in 2022 and 2023, there were some changes made, no doubt about it, during those times. But mostly, I think that's sort of out of the system. I think, it's certainly not the DSO executives' fault the way the market is turned. I mean, nobody could have predicted, that was going to happen with the interest rates doubling and tripling in some cases, the price of labor going up dramatically, there being a labor shortage, the price of supplies and equipment going up because of inflation and now maybe going up again because of tariffs. I mean, that's not the fault of DSO C-suites, and the fact that reimbursement rates are flat and not really going up. A normal business, I always say like a normal business could pass stuff on to the consumer. If you hire a plumber to come to your house and gas prices triple, you've seen this. The plumber might say, I'm sorry, Beth, there's a $20 gas surcharge for me to come to your house. And you might say, well, that sucks, but I understand the situation, and look, I got to get a plumber, so I'm going to pay his $20 because his fuel charges are more. In dentistry, unfortunately, with a lot of organizations, the reimbursement rates have not gone up, or they'll go up like 1 or 2%, but inflation will go up 5 or 10%. And it's a very challenging formula and has caused a lot of executives to have to do more with less and really cut expenses and be real creative as to how they can operate. And, I spend like all week long, every week, talking to various DSO executives, and they're really doing a great job on the whole of being super creative and really figuring out a way, to, basically navigate these very, very difficult conditions we're in.
I've been talking to several DSO leaders just in the past 2 weeks about the whiplash that they're feeling about what's happening with the tariffs and trying to like budget for what the cost increases might be and how to offset them. And, I'd love to hear some of the strategies that you're hearing as well. What they're telling me is everything from stockpiling non-perishable items so that they can have that in place already at the prices that they are today, in case prices do go up. Of course, they're looking for ways that they can cost cuts anywhere that they can, and so that they have a little bit of money in reserve in case they need to be offset these higher prices. And it's really everyone's just trying to figure out like what they need to be doing. Are you hearing any other strategies as well?
Well, look, there's a saying that a really smart managing partner of a fund told me a long time ago, of a PE fund. He said, you can't cut your way to profitability. And they're absolutely correct. I mean, you can do it temporarily. Like you can come and cut some things and you might get a one-time or a temporary boost, to do that. But in the end of the day, you've got to increase your EBITDA and find a way to do it to survive. And while the cost cutting is going on, that's really not something we should be highlighting. I mean, it's something that simply must be done in some cases, and they're going to do it. it, but that's not how, you get out of this. You got to increase your revenue and increase your EBITDA. And you do that through adopting innovative technologies. You do that through adopting new lines of business and things like that. And I am seeing that. And those are the things that I'm spending, my time on, really is learning about all the new technologies, acting as an advisor to some technology companies, helping those technology companies, find matches with the right DSO organizations where they can really add value, because not everything's going to fit. There are a lot of great technology companies that aren't a match for every DSO. And then there are a lot of things that are, and you got to find the right match and put it together. A lot of it depends on integration of technology, which PMS system you have, what other technologies you're utilizing, and depending on what you have, it's going to sync differently with different solutions. So you got to go through that maze and figure out that puzzle and figure out what makes sense. But if you can, a lot of these innovative technologies really can increase your revenue and increase your EBITDA. Some of them can offset the effects of high costs of labor or staff shortages. And then always, if you can adopt new lines of business, and maybe it's integrating specialty, integrating teeth whitening, integrating certain hygiene products, certain things that can regenerate enamel. Now you incorporate that into your office, and you've got a new line of business with new revenue. That's how you sort of try to offset the challenges of the marketplace that we're dealing with. But cost cutting is a one-time thing. You have to do it. I don't want to say you don't got to do it, but it's kind of like a one-time sort of, you go in, you evaluate the organization top to bottom, you make the cost cutting measures you think you need to make, but then that's kind of it. You can't cut your way to profitability.
No, I mean, it's amazing to see how people are increasing revenue through that innovative technology, and especially with the revenue cycle management. And one of the things I feel like we've seen a lot of announcements about in the first quarter of 2025 has been automation being added to insurance verification. So you have the Pearl PreCheck now. You have the Overjet Dental Clarity Network with their Review Pass. You have Dental Exchange now with their enhanced eligibility and their claim check automations. You have AirPay that's doing automated verifications. And then on the backside, you have companies like Zentis with their Remed, also again, Dental Exchange. And it's really fascinating. I think that is going to be the big story of 2025, is how automations are really coming in to the revenue cycle management process, so that you don't have to have your front desk people, or if you're outsourcing it, or if you have somebody in a centralized location, having to spend hours on the phone or going into portals to double check all of these. So that really the move now is that it's going to be all automated, whether you have an AI bot talking to the insurance companies on your behalf, taking that information back in and writing it back into your practice management system. So you have it all right there, and you don't have to be, having 7 different tabs open and navigating all of that. And I think that's really going to be a huge time saver, so that if you do have a limited staff now, they can be spending more time with the patients and not spending all that time on that busy work.
Well, that's a lot there, but a couple observations on all that. I think you're spot on, by the way, Beth, but a couple observations. During the shock to the system of 22 and 23, most of the cost cutting measures, not that they didn't do some in 24 too, but most of the, more dramatic cost cutting measures happened in end of 22, all of 23. And for a while, DSOs were just unable, really, given everything else going on, to invest in these new technologies. They saw the value in it, but they just said, look, we're in the midst of really stabilizing everything here, and we're not going to do that. 2025 has been the year of, hey, we stabilized it. We cut what we were going to cut. We made the changes we needed to change. Now we're looking at adopting some of these technologies because we can't do as much M&A as we want. So that's, sort of the first, observation. The second observation are the things that are the most enormous time suck is insurance verification, following up on insurance claims, a lot of revenue cycle management, functions. And one of the things that I think, Denticon does very, very well is the auto adjudication of claims. I love that feature. I'm not just saying it because, we're on like a Planet DDS type show. I love that feature. I've said that for a long time before we even started, sort of doing some of these shows. And I think it has the potential to do a lot of things. And some of the stuff Zentis is doing, I really like what they're doing. And the whole idea behind it is a number of things which are really compelling. Number one, you maximize 100% of your insurance dollars because humans couldn't really do it. The computer can make sure you're maximizing 100%. Two, you're getting your cycles down from where they were. If they're 90 days, I've seen dramatic things going down to 30, 40 days. And number three, you're doing it at a cheaper cost than you're doing it. Because the things you have to consider in revenue cycle management, a couple factors are: one, what is the cycle? Certainly the cycle is great, but what's your realization rate, right? If your cycle is 90 days, which is bad, but you're at 100% realization rate, you're like, oh, well, maybe we can live with that. If your cycle's 35 days, which is great, but your realization rate's 40%, you're like, well, that's not really going to work. And then how much does it cost to kind of get you there? Like if you're like doing a great job, but you got 50 staff members doing what 2 or 3 should do, you're like, oh yeah, we're getting every dollar, right? But your overhead is, you just, so you have to balance all of this. And some of these automated features will really let you offset, if a bot, for example, is able to successfully, and they are, it's amazing to me. It's like we're in Terminator movies or something. I can't believe what they've accomplished, but they can talk or go into their system and, fix these insurance eligibility verification issues. They can follow up on claims. They can in real time, some of these things, correct errors. Like the AI can look at it and say, in order for this claim to go through, these 10 boxes got to be checked. The thing that you filled out's got 7 boxes. You got to do these 3. We're not even going to submit it. It's like it'll stop you from submitting it until you go in and fill out these other 3, boxes. And the other thing that's happened this year that's significant is the integration of technology. Remember, we've been talking about this for a while, and in 22 and 23, there wasn't as much integration as there is now. So people were saying, we're just not going to use this because we got to click out of this viewer box, go into this other viewer box. And I made my analogy about, imagine a smart TV where you had to buy one TV for Netflix, one TV for Disney, one TV for like Prime Video. No one would do it. There'd be a riot. But in dentistry, that's exactly what it was. You had all these different viewer boxes, and it's still not perfect. It's still not. But, people I know like Pearl AI has really ramped up integrations. I know Denticon has really ramped up, integrations. Others have really, hit the gas button on integration. So there is probably, I don't know this for sure, but, double or triple the integrations now that there were, a couple years ago. And that's making a huge difference. We are really starting to see the concrete results in the form of increase of EBITDA by adopting these innovative technological solutions.
We just had our user conference called Orbit in March, and I had the chance to be there and to meet a lot of the groups that we work with. And there was this one group that I did not know, prior to that conference, and they have 17 locations. They have Denticon in all of them, and they now have the 835s, the auto posting coming in from the insurance companies. And the director of operations that I was speaking to said that by adding these 835s with the auto posting, that to take, say, $300,000 that were coming in payments, it used to take them about 20 hours manually. And now they can do it in 2. It is just that fast. It is that accurate. And she said, it's unbelievable. How
it helps you with your culture too, Beth, right?
Yes.
Imagine if I said, Beth, welcome to the organization, sit down. You're going to call insurance companies 12 hours a day. You would like go nuts. You'd be like, you'd probably quit. If you didn't quit, you'd have like 4 psychologists on speed dial. You're like, one's not enough. I got to consult with like 4 mental health professionals because I just can't sit here and do this all day. But these tools that do it on an automated basis, you can really maximize the value of your human resources, meaning your human staff. Nobody wants to take a human being, stick them in a room and say, you got to call insurance. I mean, if you have to do it, you got to do it, but nobody wants to do that. You can utilize your human resources in much more productive ways than doing that. And that increases the overall culture of the organization.
And it's really nice too, because a lot of these APIs and integrations that we're talking about, they're bringing the information now directly into, in this case, a practice management system, but they don't necessarily overwrite what you already have. They can almost put it into like a preview box. So you can look at it and then you can click to accept it. So for those folks that are a little bit hesitant about whether or not they're ready to go fully integrated and just have it be fully automated without eyes on, Like they don't have to worry about that. There's options for them based on their comfort level. But what it really does save them is from having to like open up another window, go into another portal, copy and paste all that information. It's such a huge time saver. And like you said, you can do it with fewer people, and that frees up the rest of your people to be working with patients and really creating that incredible patient experience so that people want to be coming back to see you over and over again. AI we talked about with the x-rays, we talked about AI for the RCM process. I'm seeing so many companies buying. I'm sure that at Dykema, you're going to have a lot of exhibitors there that are now doing AI for the phone calls, for the text messages, for scheduling. And that I feel like has really taken off.
The smart scheduling, Beth, really has caught my attention. Like I'm studying this. Like, like I said, everybody knows a couple of years ago, it was like diagnostic AI. It like blew my mind. Oh my God. Like, and I like did a deep dive and got into it. Now I feel like I understand it, but smart scheduling is like caught me the same way, where now I'm like obsessed with smart scheduling, and the concept is this: it's, patient calls up with a higher dollar procedure versus a lower one, and it will prioritize that on the schedule and even get it where it'll reschedule a lower dollar procedure. You got to be careful. You don't want to offend patients, but you got to run the numbers on that. And it's compelling. If you can bring a higher dollar procedure and prioritize that on the schedule, you also patients can schedule all hours of the day and night. They can get these things, sort of scheduled, because there seems to be, and I've said this with certain newer people coming up, younger people, I say new, I guess they're newer too, but younger people coming up, and a version of like talking to human beings. I see it with the young lawyers in my office. Sometimes silly things will happen. I'll be like, well, did you call the person? Did you walk to their office? No, I sent them an inner office message. I'm like, they're like 7 feet there. You could just walk there. And they do they don't have it. They look at me like I'm crazy. Like, why would I do that? I sent them a message. So, I hate to be that guy. Maybe, my generation, we walked in there and we like talking to people. There seems to be an aversion to doing that a little bit. And these things will meet the patients right where they are on that. They'll say, fine. You don't want to talk to a human being. You can schedule at 3 a.m, 2 a.m. You can come in and we'll get you set up. And if it's a high dollar procedure, we'll prioritize you. So I'm really, sort of obsessed in studying this smart scheduling. I think it's a huge game changer.
Well, and then you can automate the process all the way through. So now they're on the schedule. Now you've automated the insurance verification aspect of it, because, as soon as they have scheduled, it's automatically sending out a text message or an email with a link that says, like, fill out all your digital forms, upload your insurance card. All that information is on in. Now you're automating the insurance verification. Nobody needs to be actually picking up the phone to call the insurance companies anymore. And then all the way down to the day before the appointment. Usually you get a text message or you'll get an email a few days out and then another reminder. Well, now you can actually have it look like it's coming as a text message from the doctor saying like, hi, Brian, looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. I have the time at 2 p.m. reserved on my calendar. If you have any questions, please call the office. Thanks, Dr. Gaddis. And it just all looks personal. It feels personal, but it's all.
And it really can be, though, if they let you customize it. What I mean is, if you just let, some bot just send some stupid message, maybe. But a lot of the newer technologies will let you customize it. So maybe it's like it's the same general text, but the doctor approved it, the doctor wrote it. So it really is the sentiments of the doctor, how the doctor wants to communicate with patients. So what you're getting very much is, a message, from the doctor. It's just the technology facilitates it. The doctor can't send it to 700 people. The technology helps him or her do that, but it really is a personal message. They can come in and set personal messages for personal situations. You can even do it as aftercare. You just got wisdom teeth pulled or something. You can get a message that was personally authored at one time by the doctor, where he or she says, look, this can be painful. You can experience this. It's not uncommon for this to bleed or that to happen. If this happens, I recommend you do this. If any of these things happen, call the office right away and we'll handle you, and you're getting, in effect, a personal message, that the doctor, put together at one time. So it's really amazing, what these technologies can do, and they do enhance the patient experience. They really do.
One of the questions that came in was, do you foresee some of the companies that work in the AI space, merging or potentially expanding their services to offer more as an all-in-one platform? And I think what they mean by this question is, if right now they only do AI for imaging, is it possible that, from what you're hearing, that they might be looking at expanding into AI for phone calls or AI for text messaging?
Yeah, I mean, that is going on with different companies, the ones that are doing diagnostic AI, right now are focused on that. I mean, they do. I have heard some things, they're confidential from various people about things that are in development. So, that may happen, but there are different companies doing different things. And it is totally plausible to me. I don't have any inside information of what anybody's doing, but it's totally plausible that if a diagnostic AI company wanted to get involved in phones and other things, maybe they'd acquire one of the solutions, out there. It's easier than developing your own. I mean, I could see that, definitely, happening in the future.
So one of the other things that I get asked questions about is, hygiene is still so difficult that there's just a shortage still of hygienists. And one of them was, what do you think about the new Arizona law with the dental assistants that can now become oral preventative assistants and remove plaque and calculus and stains above the gum line, assuming that they've passed the assisted training course?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I've been studying that a little bit. It reminds me of the Minnesota legislation that passed about hygienists, that they could open up their own practices. It never really picked up steam the way people thought it would. I do know a few hygienists that did, create some lucrative operations, but it was few and far between. It wasn't like this big revolution. All of a sudden they went and did it. So I guess I'm guardedly watching that because of what happened in Minnesota. Now it's a different state, different environment. Maybe it'll be completely different. I mean, I've known many, I know you have too, Beth, hygienists that are incredibly entrepreneurial. I mean, they've got that spirit. So, I mean, this definitely presents that opportunity. It's just when it happened in Minnesota, it didn't take off the way maybe everybody thought it would be. Maybe there's less population there. Maybe, Arizona has more of a population. So maybe we'll see it take off, but I'm watching it. I mean, I'm interested in it and I'm definitely watching it.
I think it's really been fascinating to see how hygienists have gone to a gig economy in many cases where they're working, 2 days a week in one office and maybe a day or 2 in another office. And especially if they're all within the same company, but they're able to really make their own schedules. And, it's really fascinating to see how different companies are.
Well, you have this phenomenon now, right, with the temporary staffing. There's several things that have gone on. Everybody knows that after COVID, tons of hygienists just left the profession and didn't come back. That's the first problem. That created a shortage. Most people listening to this also know that the hygiene schools, because of CODA regulations and other things, I think the ratio is like 5 to 1. We talked about this on a panel recently at the ADSO, and because of that, it in a lot of ways artificially deflates the amount of people, that can get their hygienist degree. These schools would love to crank out 2 or 3 times the amount, but they can't because of the regulations. There's a lot of pressure and lobbying going on to maybe change those regulations. So, this has created a hygienist shortage. And as a result, a lot of hygienists have found it more to their liking to work for temporary companies rather than, have like a full-time job somewhere. And it gives them more flexibility and control. I just don't know, if that's sustainable long term. That's my only question with the whole thing. It's got to be priced right, and there is some pushback from the industry as to the cost of, temporary hygienists versus permanent ones. And it's just something that I'm watching really closely.
Planet DDS recently put out the 2025 Dental Industry Outlook report.
That was incredible, Beth, by the way. And again, this is another one. Look, I'm not just saying it because it's a Planet DDS type show. I'm really not. I loved that report. It needed to be done. I knew somebody eventually would do it, but it needed to be done. The industry is, just dying for statistics like that, thirsty for statistics like that. We didn't have, the ADA was not able, for a variety of reasons, to capture accurate information, mainly because a lot of the DSO community, just wouldn't fill out ADA forms for a variety of reasons. So they just weren't able to capture, the data that I felt like needed to be captured. And Planet DDS was able to do that, so much so that we're going to present that at our event. At Dykema, there's going to be a presentation. And you know this, Beth, nobody can buy their way on my stage. I just really liked it. I just absolutely like that report. I can't wait to present it at Dykema. If people listening can't wait either, you can get it right now. It's out. But I'm so impressed with it. We're going to present that report at Dykema.
Well, and the data that is out right now is all the data from 2024. And for Dykema, we're going to be having the data all the way through July. Yeah. So we'll have, the first 6 and 7 months of 2025 that we'll be able to present. What I was going to say is, we talked to more than 20, almost 25, different experts in the industry for that report, you being one of them. We also reached out to, folks that are experts in hygiene. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting was Rachel Wall was sharing about how the ADA approved 3 resolutions late last year on ways to get creative and trying to get more people in to help with hygiene programs. Like you mentioned, the student to teacher ratio needs to be increased for hygiene schools. So the ADA has approved a resolution for that. They also approved one that for dental students who have completed their hygienist competencies, that they can be allowed to practice as hygienists, while they're still waiting to get there.
That's an interesting, like, what would you call it? Like, that's an interesting side gig or whatever, you want to say. What is the term I'm looking for? But that's an interesting one, because
it's like an interim, while they're still waiting to finish dental school.
Well, they need the money. Most dentists that I talk to, at least, are not independently wealthy. I'm saying most dental students. I'm helping out with several dental schools. Some are, but most of them are not independently wealthy, and they've got big loans. So if this allows them to have a little side gig that they can make some money, to help pay their way through dental school, it's a win-win for everybody, I think.
Well, and the last one that I thought was really interesting too was, allowing international dentists to be allowed to practice as hygienists according to state licensing laws. So I thought those were, three interesting ways that the ADA was approaching this situation. And I know there's been pushback. I know that there's, it varies state to state, but I did think that it was interesting to see them kind of expanding out how we can get more hygienists into practices to help with the shortage.
Yeah, and the foreign dentist, I think, is really, really important, not just for hygiene, but for dentists. And I recently was at the Cleveland Dental Institute a couple weeks back, and they have a program. It's a 1 or 2 year residency where they help, foreign trained dentists. Some of them have decades of experience. Some of them are specialists, but, they come from places that, they don't want to live anymore for a variety, political reasons, other things. They just don't want to go there. And this program helps them do as fast a track as possible to get licensed in, the United States and be able to be dentists. And there's a shortage. We need this. And I think hygiene's a good idea, but I also am a big supporter of helping, foreign trained dentists that can go through and prove their competency through these other ways. Because honestly, you can prove whether it's there's a lot of things on the table that haven't been adopted yet, whether it's a practical exam, whether it's a residency. You can figure out, if you have highly competent instructors and they're sitting there with a foreign trained dentist, you can figure out very quickly. You don't need years. I've talked to the instructors and they've said, Brian, we're not in charge of the political machine. We don't know how, who comes up with these regulations. But honestly, we could tell in 3 months whether this person can be, is competent enough to be a licensed dentist in the US. And if we could just get to that point where, if they're not, then they're not going to pass. They're not going to get their certificate. If they, go to this course and some of the highly talented instructors look and say, no, I know they might've got, a dental degree in, this country over here, but I'm sorry, this is not up to our standards, then fine. We don't need to license them. But if they come here and they are, I think as quick as we can license them, it's better for the industry because there's a massive shortage, and a lot of dentists are going to be retiring in the next 10 years. I mean, there's no way. We've ran the numbers. Like, I understand sometimes in the past there was resistance because, we don't want, like, for lawyers, there's too many lawyers. I'll tell you that. We don't want too many because it hurts the profession for other people. Maybe it drives down compensation because there's too much. I mean, historically, these have been the reasons, but that's not the way it is in the dental. Right. There is a shortage, and it's only going to get worse, and population's going up and dentists are going down. So you almost have to do something, or you might get in a terrible situation where certain people that need dental treatment can't, they're just not able, or it'll be like one of these where you make your appointment for something and you got to go 4 months from now. You just can't get in, that same week or the same month or something. And that would be a shame, because we all know how important oral health is to overall health and everything else. And we know what happened during COVID when people could not go see their dentist, and, periodontal disease got worse, and conditions that could have been relieved very quickly lingered on for months and months and months. It's not a good situation.
Well, speaking about the need for people to be going to the dentist, last trend that I wanted to touch on today is consumer confidence. So I was talking to some DSO leaders. They were sharing that, in certain parts of the country, they're beginning to see the impact where people seem to be pulling back a little bit on moving forward with treatment. Specifically, I was speaking to 2 DSOs that are up in New England yesterday, and they were sharing that with me. I just saw a statistic about one DSO. I have to say, this was on LinkedIn, and this was what I would probably consider to be a disgruntled employee. But they were saying that they're seeing a 10% decline in ortho starts so far in 2025. And I think that they were saying that it was about 16% down for adult ortho starts. 17% down for adult ortho starts so far in 2025. And that clear aligners were down 10%. I was just wondering, what your thoughts are on consumer confidence and what you're hearing.
Well, I mean, different organizations are experiencing different things, and different organizations are doing different things to aggressively counteract, if starts are down, certain organizations are really ramping up their marketing and some things to kind of counteract it. And some are really succeeding well. So it just depends on the organization. But as a general rule, I think some, what people view as non-critical, meaning like, you got a toothache and, your eyes are watering. Yeah, you're going to go in. It just doesn't matter. You're going to do it. But if it's like, hey, do I get orthodontics in 8th grade, 9th grade, or 10th grade? Or if I'm an adult, do I get him, in 2025 or wait till 2026? Unfortunately, and it's just, shouldn't surprise anybody when inflation is there. Interest rates are up. Price of goods are up, rents are up, people have to cut corners. They're tighten their belt. I mean, that's natural. That happens in every down economy, where if somebody is struggling, where, their monthly expenses, I'll be, just silly, were $100 and now all of a sudden they're $150. They went up 50%. They're going to have to tighten their belt somewhere. They're not going to tighten their belt if they're in pain because, they got a toothache or something. But if it's, in a clear aligner or orthodontic treatment or a teeth whitening treatment or, some other veneers or some other thing they've been wanting to do, some of them are tightening their belt and postponing that stuff. I mean, there's no question that is going on. Again, it's affecting different organizations differently, and some are aggressively taking measures to counteract it and still hanging in there doing well. But I think that is just a natural, result of the challenging economic conditions we're in. And by the way, that's not new, Beth. I mean, you're talking about right now and what you saw recently, and certainly, but like most of last year in 23, this was sort of the phenomenon. I mean, that's not a brand new thing. And until, the interest rates come down and we come out of some of these inflationary conditions and people feel better. I mean, the other thing, if you're following the administration, there was a lot of downsizing, a lot of layoffs. And, It's not our show to talk about what they should or shouldn't do. But my only point is, if you work in the government right now and they're experiencing layoffs and things, you may be uncertain as to whether you're going to have a job. And that may affect your ability to go sign up for some orthodontic treatment or something where you're going to sign on for a financial commitment when, you feel like you might, have to be looking for a new job in the near future. So all all of those things, are sort of affecting this right now. But, on the whole, dentistry is virtually recession proof. It really, really is. In other fields, these conditions might result in 50, 60, 70% downturn. In dentistry, it's much, 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 much less. And that's the beauty of why I feel like it's one of the greatest industries among all industries.
Well, we have a lot to talk about coming up at the DICMA conference, which this year is going to be in August. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited. We're tracking to have a record crowd again. Last year we had, 2,000 and change, 2,050 or 60, something like that is my understanding. And we're tracking to be higher than that. We have more people signed up right now in April than have ever been signed up at this juncture before.
I've got my room booked.
Yeah. Well, I will say that, right. I don't want to just sit here and shamelessly promote it, but I will say the hotels, there's still rooms right now, but I don't think the rooms are going to last, Beth, more than another 3-4 weeks. Probably by sometime in May, the rooms are all going to be gone. So yeah, I would encourage people to go out and get their rooms. And we're looking at a record crowd. I couldn't be more excited. We got John McEnroe as our keynote speaker. The drone show is back. The spasmatics are back.
Awesome.
The agenda's on DICMADSO.com. Everybody can see it. And I'm really excited about it.
Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. It is always just such a pleasure to catch up with you.
Beth, really, really enjoyed today. And we'll be back again soon.
Thank you so much. Just for everyone who's watching, if you would like to reach out to Brian Colao, please email DICMADSO@DICMA.com for that information on the DICMA conference. It's actually my favorite conference of the entire year. I've gone, I think, 7 times now, Brian, and it is so much fun.
Too much is never enough, Beth. Too much is never enough. So, we've had it. This will be our 12th, and you've been there 7. I'll give you a B+. You're doing okay, but too much is never enough.
It is absolutely fantastic. I recommend to everybody that you go to DICMA, to DICMA's website in order to get more information about that. And to learn about Planet DDS, please visit planetdds.com. From great information from dental industry experts like Brian to technology that can make your life easier, you can depend on Planet DDS. Thank you so much for joining us today.